Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. In a couple of seconds, you will hear from the Honorable Justice Brett Kavanaugh. You'll hear from former President and future President Donald Trump. There's nothing stopping Trump. He's up in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. He's even very close in Minnesota. He could possibly win in Minnesota as well. Could be as close to a landslide as possible. Hit subscribe. I've been telling you, ladies and gentlemen, and again, in a couple of seconds, you'll hear from Brett Kavanaugh. I've been telling you that the Supreme Court is going to give Trump victory after victory. It's taking place. Democrats have made absurd leaps of logic. They're stating in the D.C. case, which is why the Supreme Court gave Trump a huge victory already in looking at the case, because they're going to side with Trump on partial presidential immunity, at least, in a 5-4 decision, at least. Could be 6-3. Roberts could also join Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Alito, Barrett, and Clarence and Justice Thomas. The reason that the Supreme Court decided to look at this case is because if you read the D.C. indictment, Democrats are trying to say that Trump committed a crime by performing a speech and by speaking to people within his administration to find out if there was foul play. He had every right to do so. He had every right to perform a speech. He did not tell anyone to commit a crime. He had every right to go through the legal challenge channels through the courts. If he lost court cases, so be it. He went through his attorneys. He went through the courts. He went through people within his administration and Republicans in other states. He had every right to do those things. That's why they didn't indict him until 2024, late 2023. Okay, they could have done so in 2021. There was no crime. That's the issue. Hit subscribe to this channel right now, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and we're going to see something very interesting right now. I want you to understand when you listen to Brett Kavanaugh in his confirmation and in speeches, the reason that he's already given Trump a victory is because Kavanaugh, like Barrett, like Justice Thomas, like Alito, okay, definitely like Gorsuch, are going to be looking at the Constitution. You'll hear him talk about this from an originalist perspective. They're not going to say that Trump went above his job criteria because he performed a speech and contested results. They're not going to say that. That is an absurd proposition. That is a completely absurd notion. Because if you want to imprison Trump for contesting results by performing a speech or by going through the court system and his lawyers or by discussing how to contest results with members of his administration or officials within his administration, that leaves a precedent for future presidents. And Republicans can go after Democrats in the same manner. He did nothing criminal. If you read the indictment, all of these indictments are written as if they were devised by Democratic Party strategists. There's categorically nothing criminal within, in terms of what Trump did. It was a terrible day. You had billions in property damage that summer prior. With Democrats, you could link the rhetoric to the billions in property damage. You could link Chuck Schumer's rhetoric to a man trying to take Kavanaugh's life. So Democrats have no problem with rhetoric when they're the ones chastising, reprimanding the Supreme Court, like Schumer with Kavanaugh, which led to a catastrophic event, and like Biden, who, garbled words, with garbled words and mumbling, tried to intimidate the Supreme Court. By the way, President Obama also tried to intimidate the Supreme Court. So Democrats always talk about norms and traditions and then trample upon them. But anyway, hit subscribe to this channel right now. You'll hear exactly why Brett Kavanaugh has already given Trump presidential immunity. The immunity case will be decided, the oral arguments in April, late April, and then in June, they're going to give Trump at least partial immunity, could go back to lower courts, which would then prolong this into way past 2025. Trump will dissolve the special counsel the second he's president, which is what he must do, because the actual despots and authoritarians wanted to interfere indict and imprison their political opponents. Gee, who do you think imprisons political opponents? Oh, that's right, Democrats. Or at least they try to, but they'll fail miserably. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is Kavanaugh talking about his originalism and originalist perspective, which will protect President Trump because he did nothing wrong in terms of a speech. Okay, he was still president with Supreme Court precedent and the Constitution protecting him. He did not go beyond the bounds of any official act as president because he was doing something that benefited Republicans or his political side. Democrats do that routinely, all the time. Biden, other Democrats have done that all the time as president. Hit subscribe right now.
All right, let me ask you a couple more. You're an originalist.
Did I pay attention? Yes, I pay attention to the text, the original public meaning, but informed. I always want to make sure I say precedent. If you're in a constitutional case, precedent is critically important, right, and that's part of the text of the Constitution.
Right. But the focus of primarily of an originalist is an understanding of the Constitution by the people, an objective test at the time it was written and ratified.
The meaning as opposed to the intent, and then informed.
Right.
I always have to add precedent.
I get it. I'm not trying to trick you.
No, I understand.
I couldn't trick you.
I just want to be clear in case someone takes something out of context.
All right. Are you willing to overturn precedent that you think conflicts with the original public understanding of the document?
The Supreme Court's rules on precedent, the precedent on precedent, sets forth a series of conditions that you look for before you consider whether to overrule.
But I'm just asking you if you come upon a case and you say, you know, I'm on the Supreme Court now, and I've looked at this, and that's not under originalism. That's not what the public understanding was.
So the first inquiry is the prior decision wrong, actually grievously wrong? And if you thought it was grievously wrong, that would be, you'd go on to because of that or for some other reason, you'd go on to the next steps of the stare decisis inquiry, but that's how that would work, if I understand the question correctly.
Okay. All right. Can we
So the Constitution says that the president is commander-in-chief. As commander-in-chief, and the other protections or powers within the Constitution, you can perform a speech. You can delegate responsibility to officials within your administration. You can work with state officials of your political party. You can do a lot of things that other presidents have done prior to Trump. They're not going to imprison Trump because of a speech or because he contested results. What they did in the indictment in D.C. is they said he went above and beyond his role as president in trying to contest results. Therefore, he should be imprisoned. This is completely absurd. Then they say, then you have Democrats and partisans saying, oh, nobody's above the rule of law. Well, we just heard that Biden absolutely is, unfortunately, above the rule of law. He mishandled classified data, and the special counsel said because he couldn't remember and cognitive skills were a huge issue with Biden, that it was a big problem, and no jury would indict Biden because he would be an elderly man with cognitive issues. But he mishandled classified data in like 5 different locations, okay? Or 5 or 6 different locations, all right? So, Hal, thank you. Such an obvious witch hunt on Trump 2024. Exactly. To my super chat, thank you so much. Hal Coker, thank you. Thank you so exactly. And by the way, there's the Patreon is below, ladies and gentlemen, for in the upload. If you're just watching this channel, if you enjoy the channel, hit subscribe, and if you want to support my Patreon, that'll be below. But ladies and gentlemen, they're trying to say in the DC indictment, which is why the Supreme Court looked at it, and which already the Supreme Court gave a huge defeat to Democrats. Trump, the special counsel Smith, said Trump went above and beyond his job description. But he didn't do that because official acts, a speech, is covered under official acts. As president, you're allowed to perform a speech without Democrats indicting you and imprisoning you for the speech. Furthermore, that speech had nothing to do with criminal behavior. Zero, absolutely nothing. Democrats deceptively edited parts of the speech where he said peaceful, patriotic. So that's why you had a 9-0 unanimous Supreme Court ruling against the Democratic Party in Colorado in the Supreme Court. They're going to give Trump either partial or complete immunity because the special counsel is trying to imprison Trump for performing a speech. Let's go ahead and listen to Greg Jarrett. He's fantastic. This is a wonderful, wonderful recap of why the Supreme Court's likely to side with Trump. At least give him partial presidential immunity, which is a huge, huge, unmitigated disaster for Democrats and a monumental victory for Trump. This is like the biggest story, the most important, consequential, historic story that, people are talking about it, but not like this channel. So hit subscribe right now.
Well, I think the Supreme Court looked at the circuit court decision and said, hey, you went way too far. You're dismissing any notion of immunity, even if a president acts consistent with his duties. That is absurd logically. And it's inconsistent, by the way, and this is the important part, with the Supreme Court precedent 4 decades ago that a president does have absolute immunity from civil lawsuits as long as his actions fall within the outer perimeter of his official acts. Well, Sean, the exact same reasoning applies to criminal prosecutions. If it's otherwise, my goodness, the chilling effect on presidential decision-making would trigger paralysis. Instead of a chief executive, so America would be ruled by a committee of lawyers. They'd be afraid to do anything out of fear of future prosecution.
Greg, let me ask you this. Would a more nuanced version versus the argument of absolute immunity maybe be, of course, you have freedom of speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded building? Would that be... Exactly. Would there be an analogy there?
Yes.
And you would expect the court to do that.
And Jordan said this as well. I suspect the current justices will extend the existing immunity standard in civil actions to criminal cases and then remand the Trump case back to the trial court to decide whether Trump's acts are covered as official.
So it's already Supreme Court precedent. This was right after Nixon, that presidents are immune from civil prosecution for official acts. Okay, so or what they do as president. Let's say it's a speech, for example. You can't just say that Trump performed a speech and therefore, because criminal activity took place after the speech, he should be imprisoned. You would have to, for example, show without a shadow of a doubt that his speech led to convictions. Or let's say the defense of some of the people convicted was, well, we listened to Trump and therefore we committed crimes. But that's never been a defense for anyone who was convicted of a crime in January. Furthermore, people have been acquitted. They've actually been acquitted because exculpatory evidence was withheld from defendants. So the Department of Justice, Biden's Department of Justice, withheld video footage exonerating defendants. That's why 2 people have been acquitted already. Okay, so they just lie all the time, and they say Trump told 40,000 lies. If you use the standard by which the Washington Post utilized against Trump, and eviscerating and debating the semantics of every single word uttered by Trump. Instead of 40,000, you'd get 60,000 lies, or you'd get maybe around the same amount of lies with Biden, because Biden doesn't really speak to the press. So, but when he doesn't tell the truth at all. Democrats have no problem with lying if it helps them. And Trump's lies, if you asked a Democrat, well, what are Trump's lies? They couldn't tell you an actual grandiose lie. They would actually lie themselves in trying to explain Trump's lies. Well, he said everyone that what wasn't important. No, he didn't. He made the same initial statements as Andrew Cuomo and Nancy Pelosi. The difference is that Democrats forget that initially they didn't take what seriously at all. And so they all made statements that were not accurate, okay? But you look at Biden, oh, I didn't know about Hunter's business associates. Oh, yes, you did. You knew exactly what was going on. So these are grandiose issues. Then, of course, everything is they try to muddy the waters, like, oh, Kushner is corrupt. It's like, Kushner doesn't have a laptop full of bribery and graft schemes. Kushner, his family was they were billionaires, or they had hundreds of millions of dollars before going into politics. Not so with the Bidens. So, I mean, they try desperately to just muddy the waters. Then they accuse Matt Gaetz of everything under the sun. It's like, well, he hasn't been convicted of anything because there's no evidence. See, if you actually indicted Democrats in the manner that Democrats indict Trump, you would get easy convictions. You wouldn't get the Supreme Court going to bat for the Democratic Party. You'd get convictions. There's obvious, corruption, graft, bribery. You already have enough evidence to impeach and also indict Hunter and Joe. The New York Post emails that were printed that nobody, not even the Bidens, have an issue with. They think that they've already admitted those emails were authentic and that 50 intel officials lied. Okay, you know that when the entire American political system is going to bat for Democrats, they're trying to prevent Americans from learning the truth. The truth, however, is that there is bribery and graft on the Democratic Party side. Okay, and there wasn't any criminal activity with Trump. That's why the Supreme Court keeps saving Trump. That's why Democrats want to do away with the Supreme Court now, because the only institution that hasn't been influenced by media and the Democratic Party is the Supreme Court. That's why they can't stand it. That's why they can't stand Trump. That's why Democrats or liberal Democrats disown friends and family. The average liberal Democrat, wonderful, amazing, probably amazing human being, extremely intelligent, okay? Most liberal Democrats or progressives do not have a Trump supporter or a Trump voter as a friend, because they've purged themselves. It's like a religious pursuit. It's a blasphemy. They live not only in a bubble, but in a world where dissent within their political paradigm is heretical. It's blasphemous. That's why they purge themselves. That's why oftentimes you'll have the one liberal, morally superior, highly educated liberal family member that'll ruin a Thanksgiving, dinner or brunch, or, they'll ruin a party just going off about how much they can't stand Trump and how immoral Trump is, as they ignore everything from Hunter and Joe and Hillary and all the obvious attempts at trying to silence free speech and imprison their political opponents with going after Trump. I mean, could you imagine if Trump indicted the Democratic Party nominee under 91 criminal charges? They would never allow that to take place. They would say he's an authoritarian. They're already saying he's an authoritarian and despot, and the man's been indicted and they want to imprison him. So it's like the cognitive dissonance is unbelievable. When Trump wins again, it will be the most gigantic, enormous middle finger that the world has ever seen. And you'll be able to see it throughout the galaxy, actually. Because what's taken place is that Democrats have made absurd leaps of logic. Trump was a Kremlin operative. Trump tried to overthrow the country. He tried to foment a rebellion. He said both sides. None of these things are true. Literally, none of these things are true. The context, and you see what he's taking place right now. He was talking about the automotive industry. It's like, oh my God, did you see what he said? So they remove context within words. They spin, they deceptively edit videos and his speeches. They lie all the time, and people are tired of it. People are tired of it. That's why you have celebrities now finally moving away from Democrats and voting for Trump. And it's now going to become cool and, the in thing to do to vote for Trump, which is like the worst thing for Democrats. And by the way, like, they don't have a second in charge. The Democratic Party is actually on the ropes. It's not Trump. They don't have a second in charge. With Trump, you could say, well, you know what? His vice president, hopefully it's Tim Scott, is the front runner for 28. But you know what? It's like Democrats, they're the ones actually on the ropes, losing Supreme Court decisions all the time. Having their case in Georgia, for example, be completely dismantled. Having the case in Florida, be dismantled before our very eyes as well. And then everyone's going to laugh if he's convicted for the New York case. But let's go ahead because that's the most obvious, overt attempt at just a desperate attempt at trying to knock Trump out of 24. This is a good recap of from an educational standpoint, a good recap of why Trump is going to be victorious, and Brett Kavanaugh and other conservatives are going to side with Trump. Brett Kavanaugh, by the way, usually sides with the majority. The majority is conservative, and the majority will side with Trump on this case. Check this out.
Each side. So again, the easy thing would be to punt, because a lot of people are going to be unhappy whatever they choose. I think Donald Trump benefits, as usual, by having unhinged enemies that overreach all the time. If the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals had been more modest in what they agreed to, I think the Supreme Court might have not taken it. But I think they put the Supreme Court in position. Can't pass the buck. We're the place that adjudicates these things, and we have an obligation to the Constitution to do it right. And we hope the one thing would be better on all sides if they could read the case and just, instead of Trump's name, read President, because it's going to apply to all presidents afterward, possibly even Joe Biden.
There's a precedent, Dan, Nixon v. Fitzgerald, a case, Supreme Court case, 1982, where the court said that former presidents have absolute immunity from prosecution against civil lawsuits for acts that are within the outer perimeter of his official duties. This case is going to decide if that immunity applies to criminal prosecution as well, and that's what the justices are going to be looking at.
Yes, exactly. And but though I think we should say, I don't believe the justices are going to themselves decide whether Trump committed a criminal act.
No, not at all.
Some people, I think, expect that somehow the Supreme Court is going to decide Trump committed a crime.
That's for the trial judge.
That is for the trial judge. And so what's going on here is whether the President Trump had immunity for these acts. And if he didn't have immunity, then the case is going to go back to Jack Smith and Judge Chutka to then start pursuing that trial. Otherwise, it goes back to the trial court for a finding of fact on whether...
Probably, if the court remands that case back, finds he does have absolute immunity, and then says, but we don't know if these acts were in the outer perimeter, that's for the trial court to look at and investigate and go back and have a fact finding.
Let's keep in mind, there's an almost obsession around the idea that this involves Donald Trump. And I think what's important here is that the Supreme Court understands whatever they do is going to set a precedent, which could affect future presidents. Presidents make tough decisions all the time. And if a president has to sit there while in office trying to figure out whether he's going to be criminally prosecuted after he's out of office, they're going to be consulting with White House lawyers all the time rather than making decisions in interest of the public good.
And that was the argument about civil lawsuits in the Nixon v. Fitzgerald case. Kim, let's talk about the timeline here. This really does push things back for Jack Smith. Let's say that the president is found not to be immune. Jack Smith can then go to the trial, but the Supreme Court, they won't issue a ruling until May or maybe even June. And then that will push the trial judge has said the parties need, as much as 3 months to prepare for the trial. That pushes it right into September, which is, talk about a tough decision for Merrick Garland. You going to let that trial proceed in the middle of a campaign?
So, of course, Democrats would allow any trial with Trump. Even in November of 24, November 5th, they would love a decision. Trump was a criminal. Don't vote for him. This is why Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Alito, Barrett, Justice Thomas, very likely Roberts, possibly even one of the three liberal justices will say that Trump is immune from prosecution. So there's Nixon v. Fitzgerald. So former presidents are already immune from civil cases after leaving office. The interesting thing is that Democrats want to, of course, do away with precedent because the precedent oftentimes doesn't help them. And they want to say, well, Trump is not immune from criminal activity. American Patriot, thank you. Roxanne Acosta, thank you. Roxana, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, to my super chat. Thank you. Thank you so very, very much. So what they're trying to say, and that was a really wonderful, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal journalists that you just saw. What they're trying to say, Jack Smith is trying to say that Trump, his actions as president, as president, the speech, working with officials in his administration to contest results, they're trying to say as president, he's not immune from criminal prosecution. But he didn't commit an actual crime. The performing the speech was not an actual crime. The absurd notion that the speech led to criminal behavior, if that's the case, then it should apply to Chuck Schumer, who literally used very, very belligerent, not only belligerent, but he targeted Kavanaugh, and then somebody tried to take Kavanaugh's life. So if Democrats want to say that Trump's rhetoric led to criminal activity, they should also indict and imprison a Democratic senator who tried to intimidate a specific Supreme Court justice, which then directly led to somebody trying to take his life. But they're not going to do that because they're hypocrites. So, but Trump was president when he performed the speech. This is so simple. It's just like, so if you have just a basic grasp of logic and you're not the most apoplectic, somewhat hysterical type of individual, you understand basic common sense and logic, a lot of the times you'll get this kind of apoplectic response from morally superior liberal Democrats. You know who they are. And they get so upset and flustered and flabbergasted, and they're so upset. They can't believe that anyone would see anything differently from them. And yet a 9-0 Supreme Court victory, a complete and utter rebuke of their absurd nonsense. So he used the word peaceful. He said, go peaceful, go patriotically. And I mean, it's like, it's like they deceptively edited his words. They withheld exculpatory video evidence. There's really nothing that they can say that Trump did that was an actual crime that day, other than try to link him directly to criminal behavior, and that's, they can't do that. So, because, you saw the Supreme Court was like, nah, it wasn't a rebellion, so. And it was a 9-0 Supreme Court victory, okay? Democrats believe that if they think he committed a rebellion, the Supreme Court will then follow their lead. This is also going to be a huge victory, because if Trump actually committed a crime, most Americans would understand, okay, God forbid he did this or that, he ended someone's life. And everyone saw it. Then then yes, you could be indicted and imprisoned, but not for a speech, not for trying to contest results. You know who the victims are in these indictments? The victims, they say, are the United States of America and the average American and Congress. How on earth is Congress the victim of anything Trump did? That criminal behavior had nothing to do with Trump. Queen Bee, hello. That criminal behavior had nothing to do with Trump. That's why they didn't indict him until years later. They knew very well. The Federal Bureau of Investigation found no evidence of any concerted effort, furthermore, to commit a crime on Trump's behalf. Furthermore, there was video footage withheld from the American public. So, that Tucker Carlson, we found out, and then people were acquitted. Imagine, the Democrats are the ones who care so much about prison reform legislation, except when it's Republicans being imprisoned. Then you have an unarmed woman whose life was taken. Democrats care so much about unarmed individuals, except when it's a Republican, a female Republican, and her life is taken. Then not a word from Democrats. Then they're law and order. The hypocrisy is unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Let's listen to Alina Habba. She's fantastic. Actually, let's listen to President Trump real quick.
Trump prosecutor, deranged Jack Smith, he is a deranged person, met with high officials at the White House just prior to these political sleazebags indicting me over nothing. If this is so, which it is because we have proof, that means that Biden and his fascist thugs knew and approved of the country's dividing form of election interference. In other words, they knew exactly what was happening with respect to the raid on Mar-a-Lago, with respect to the indictment of Donald Trump, the president, the former president, despite their insisting that they knew nothing. Biden said, I know nothing about it, but he also said that about Hunter's business, that he knew nothing about it. Now he ended up lying. He said they knew nothing about Russia, 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 Ukraine, 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 knew nothing about anything, and it was all a big lie. But he knew all about the indictment, and he knew all about the raid on Mar-a-Lago, which was a disgrace. Never happened a thing like that before. Our country is going communist. Our country is going far beyond socialist. It's fascist. It's Marxist. It's horrible what's happening to America. America is no longer America. But we're going to make our country great again. We're going to make it bigger and better and stronger than ever before. Thank you very much. Deranged Jack Smith and his team.
So they likely met with Biden's administration, just like state prosecutors met with. It'd be interesting to see if New York Attorney General or district attorneys met with Biden's administration, and they probably did. There's such a concerted effort to interfere in 24. Democrats complain so much about Trump being a despot, and they're the ones who want to silence you on social media. They want to patrol your speech. They if you say something they don't like, they want you literally just to not to be able to feed your family and work and make money. They want to imprison Trump. So, and they have almost complete influence. They have immense influence on the media narrative. So tell me a despot that doesn't have influence on media is being indicted by his political opponents. Let's see. Doesn't have control of intel agencies. That's the Democratic part. Or I should say influence. You have intel officials coming out to hide information on corruption within the Democratic Party. So, I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. It is pretty unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead. Let's listen to President Trump and his lawyer here. Really, really interesting. This is also going to really help in the Supreme Court, this argument right here. Like the Wall Street Journal journalists talked about, this isn't about Trump. It really isn't about Donald Trump. It's about Supreme Court precedent. So you already have Nixon v. Fitzgerald, which protects Trump. But it's about Supreme Court precedent for future generations, for future administrations. Okay? Every other administration now is going to think twice. Every other president is going to think twice before he performs a speech. The speech is like, or contests results. You don't think Democrats are going to do the exact same thing? They're just better at lawfare than Trump. They're just better because they have you have justices in New York, D.C. That will oftentimes side with them. They have virtual control or a tremendous amount of influence, let's say, on media, the narrative in media. They're very good at utilizing the courts to go after political opponents. Very good. Trump is not so good at that. He's not so good at that. And then this is the thing. The precedent was that he lost cases. Then they were happy. Then they indicted him and imprisoned him on trying to take those cases to court. I mean, could you imagine? They will stop at nothing. The only reason, God forbid, the unthinkable ain't going to happen. I mean, we hope, but God forbid, is that everyone on the planet would know what time it is, what time it was. Okay? So nobody trusts. The average American does not trust government or media. And you'd have to be a complete imbecile to do that. And the reason they don't is because there used to be a time when Sam Donaldson or Peter Jennings didn't care who won. Now you have journalists crying that Trump won. It's like, what? What, you're crying about a great economy? You're crying about a great foreign policy? Oh, well, you know what? He's said bad things and he influences bad people. Bad people are going to they're going to find some motive to do bad things all the time. That's why you need the Second Amendment, but that's another story. So, anyway, let's go ahead and listen to this. Just to let everybody know, I know that I'm doing a lot of these segments on this topic. This is going to be, if the unanimous Supreme Court decision was a huge victory for Trump, this will be a monumental victory. They don't even have to give him full immunity. Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen? They don't even have to give him full immunity. They could just be like, well, speeches are protected. Or no, they could say this. They don't even have to mention speeches. They could say, nah, you can't convict him on official acts. Then Democrats will be like, no. And then Jack Smith, like the journalists were saying at the Wall Street Journal, will have to go to lower courts. Then they'll have to find out, well, what was an official act? Then they'll try desperately to say that his speech was not an official act. And then, of course, the Supreme Court will get involved and be like, yeah, the speech was an official act. Sorry. Anyway, this is going to go past 2025, where Trump will dissolve the that's what Democrats want to do. they'll dissolve the Trump will dissolve the special counsel. So, again, this is not about love trucks. Hello. This is not about Trump. This is about the Constitution, the United States of America, the presidency. And like, Democrats care more about imprisoning Trump based on a speech than limiting the president's use of the authorization for use of military force. So they care more about imprisoning Trump than preventing presidents from just sending Americans anywhere in the world without congressional approval. Hit subscribe if you're new.
First of all, this was a momentous day. This is the first time in our nation's history that a sitting president has decided to prosecute his major opponent, who's leading in all the polls in the country. The issues that the court had to deal with today were momentous. Whether or not a president of the United States could be prosecuted for carrying out his responsibilities, doing his job as president. We can't have a country where every 4 years there's a cycle of political recrimination, where one administration attacks a prior administration, when in fact that candidate is leading in the polls and will be the next president of the United States. As our legal team, as our appellate team made clear, that would be a disaster for our country. That would be a direct attack on democracy, and that cannot happen.
The elites are laughing at us.
What was very significant today, and I'm sure you all caught it, is the special counsel conceded that if it was President Obama, the president is carrying out his job responsibilities. If we adopt what the special counsel wants, if we adopt what President Biden wants, then we open the Pandora's box to political prosecution after political prosecution after political prosecution. In fact, Joe Biden could be prosecuted for trying to stop this man from becoming the next president of the United States. We don't need political prosecutions, we need political process. I'd like to introduce President Trump.
Well, I want to thank you all, and we had a very momentous day in terms of what was learned and what they've conceded. They conceded two major points that were right in doing it. I don't think they had much of a choice, but they're very, very big, very powerful points. And I think we're doing very well. I think it's very unfair when a political opponent, is prosecuted by the DOJ, by Biden's DOJ. So they're losing in every poll. They're losing in almost every demographic. Numbers came out today that are really very mind-boggling if you happen to be Joe Biden. And I think they feel this is the way they're going to try and win. And that's not the way it goes. That'll be bedlam in the country. It's a very bad thing. It's a very bad precedent. As we said, it's the opening of a Pandora's box, and that's a very sad thing that's happened with this whole situation. When they talk about threat to democracy, that's your real threat to democracy. And I feel that as a president, you have to have immunity. Very simple. And if you don't, as an example, if this case were lost on immunity, and I did nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong. I'm working for the country, and I worked on very hard on voter fraud, because we have to have free elections. We have to have strong borders. We have to have free elections. Those two things almost above all. And we found tremendous voter fraud. That's very bad for our country. You had a very big event yesterday, as you saw, in Georgia, where the district attorney is totally compromised. The case has to be dropped. They went after, I guess, 18 or 20 people. They wanted to go after a lot of other people. They wanted to go after senators. She was out of her mind. Now it turns out that that case is totally compromised. In fact, they say she's in far more criminal liability than any of the people she's looking at. So I think that when you look at what happened, where they pay a lawyer with absolutely no experience $700,000 who happens to be her lover or her boyfriend, And then they go on trips and vacations together, very expensive vacations together. And the reason they paid him so much because he was after me. Because this way they can afford to pay him a lot more. It probably passes a certain test. And that's a very sad thing that happened in Georgia. And I would imagine that case is going to be dropped. Every legal analyst that I've spoken to, every legal analyst that I've read have said that case is so compromised now it has to be dropped. Very good people were very badly hurt by that case. It's a shame. Very good people. People did nothing wrong. They did nothing different than what Democrats have been doing for years and years and years, whether it's slates or anything else that you're talking about. But they were very hurt, and it turns out that she profited tremendously on that case. It's illegal. What she did is illegal. So we'll let the state handle that. But what a sad situation it is. I want to thank everybody for the fairness. We've been covered very fairly. Most people agree that we're entitled as a president to immunity. If you didn't have immunity, as an example, Joe Biden with the prosecutor, we're not going to give you $1 billion unless you get rid of the prosecutor that's after the company or his son or whoever it is they're after. But he wanted that prosecutor gone, and he's on tape saying it. Or you could say the horrible job he's done at the border where our country is being destroyed, or the horrible situation that took place. The lowest moment, I think, in the history of our country was Afghanistan, the way we withdrew, not to be able to do your job. But if this didn't work out, if I wasn't given immunity, then other presidents, when we talked about today, President Obama with the drone.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a huge, huge victory, because what Democrats have done, if you could look at the indictment, go read the indictment if you're bored. It says that the victims of Trump's crimes were Congress. Listen to how utterly absurd this is. Congress, the American people, Congress, the American people, what else? And something else, another, it was just so grandiose. And it's like the only people who suffered, yes, it's true, the American people suffered when mashed potato brains became president. So I guess they suffered because Trump was unable to contest results successfully. Other than that, though, he's under statutes that talk about he tried to defraud the country. So he obviously believed what he was saying, number one. Number two, they're not going to be able to prove that he knew he was wrong. Okay? There's a simple rebuttal to any attempt at debunking Trump. They keep saying, oh, Trump was debunked. There was never a thorough investigation. There were 4-day investigations, a week-long investigation. There was never a Mueller probe style investigation. You need people to testify under oath, and he didn't get that. You'd need the Federal Bureau of Investigation to help him. He didn't get that. So, and then you have you have other victories also. So, it'll be really interesting, ladies and gentlemen. I still think that Congress is going to impeach Biden. You have a lot of victories ahead in addition to November. So hit subscribe. We're at 222,000 subscribers because of you. We're almost at 223,000. Be here tomorrow. I will, of course, do one or two, especially try to do 2 live streams a day. If you want to become part of the Patreon, that will be below in the pinned comment. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening, great day. To my viewers around the world, God bless you.